Let's dive right into a seriously dense, yet incredibly powerful piece of source material today, the recent Accountability Report broadcast by the Raizal Development Center. If you've been tracking the multi-generational struggle of the Raizal people for self-determination down in Colombia, you know just how crucial transparent information is. This broadcast, it was a massive effort to lay out exactly where their movement stands right now. We're going to unpack hours of complex legal, political, and institutional updates, distilling the whole shebang right here to show you exactly how this community is fighting for its future.
No more strangers will rule in our home. To really grasp the raw emotion behind this report, we have to start right there. That poignant quote was sung at the opening of their broadcast, and it perfectly captures the soul of the Raizal Nation's struggle. It immediately sets up the emotional and historical stakes for us. You see, they aren't just fighting for, bureaucratic administrative changes. They're fighting for the survival of their culture, their lands, and their right to exist as a self-governing people after feeling marginalized for literally decades.
So, the organization behind this massive broadcast is the Raizal Development Center, often just called the RDC. Basically, they act in close alliance with the Raizal Council, which is the community's governing authority, along with their global diaspora. This specific accountability report was actually the launchpad for a 4-week public series. The ultimate goal? Total transparency. They wanted to speak directly to their people, cut through all the speculation and misinformation, and objectively lay out the very real obstacles and victories in their multi-generational legal and political efforts.
To make sense of all the dense information presented in their broadcast, we've broken it down into 4 strategic pillars. First, building institutional capacity. Second, the legal strategy pivot. Third, the territorial crisis. And finally, taking the fight global.
Pillar 1. Building institutional capacity and overcoming structural weaknesses.
In the broadcast, RDC leadership was incredibly candid. They straight up admitted that historical communication and structural organization have been their biggest blind spots. I mean, you can't run a government with your fingernails, right? But that's exactly how the 13-year-old Raizal Council has had to operate for years. So to fix this, they're taking some major steps. They're establishing their own streaming and radio studios so they can own their narrative. They're also proposing a dedicated human rights advocacy center, securing permanent headquarters to replace borrowed temporary offices, and expanding to include paid, properly equipped staff to handle the heavy daily load of governance.
Moving on to Pillar 2, the legal strategy pivot, going from the Raizal Statute to presidential decrees.
Okay, to really understand this legal pivot, we have to look at a massive 46-year gridlock. For decades, leaders have been trying to push the comprehensive Raizal Statute through the Colombian Congress. And get this, out of 169 proposed articles, an impressive 90% have been fully negotiated and agreed upon. 90%! Yet all progress remains completely blocked by a final 10% that the government just refuses to concede.
So what exactly is in this missing 10%? Well, according to the RDC, it represents the absolute core of their autonomy. We're talking territory protection, self-government, and finance. Without those 3 pillars, the other 90% is kind of meaningless, right? Because Congress has stalled on these vital points for almost half a century, Raizal leadership realized something had to change. They couldn't just sit around waiting while their lands were continuously being lost.
And that brings us to their brilliant tactical pivot. Since the comprehensive Raizal Statute requires congressional approval and has been stuck in the mud for decades, leadership is shifting focus to target presidential decrees. Now, decrees are executive actions, which means they're a lot faster. While they aren't permanent laws, they act as a temporary defensive shield. It's basically a way to immediately stop the bleeding, specifically the privatization of their lands, while the broader, permanent fight in Congress continues. It's a highly pragmatic, survival-driven legal strategy.
Pillar 3, the territorial crisis and protecting the homeland from overpopulation.
The report identifies overpopulation as the single most urgent existential threat to the Raizal culture. I mean, they are literally running out of space. To combat this, the RDC outlined a really specific 3-step tactical approach. First up, enforcing a legally mandated carrying capacity model to strictly limit density. Second, reforming Decree 2762 to strengthen local institutional controls over migration. And third, executing a community-based census. That last one is absolutely crucial so they don't have to rely on national government data to prove just how severe this crisis actually is.
And the urgency here cannot be overstated. Get this.
Years ago, the courts actually ruled in favor of the Raizal people, ordering local and national offices to complete that carrying capacity study. But in a recent follow-up meeting, it was revealed that those institutions had done absolutely nothing to comply. Zero. So this upcoming May 2026 tribunal hearing, that is the moment the RDC plans to hold these offices legally accountable for flat-out ignoring direct court orders.
Finally, Pillar 4, taking the fight global through international courts. Because domestic progress is so often met with complete institutional silence, Raizal leadership has been forced to escalate things outside of Colombia. And this timeline really shows the immense endurance of that effort. What started way back in the 1980s as a grassroots push for autonomy evolved by 2003 into their very first human rights delegation to Washington, D.C. Fast forward to late 2024, they were submitting executive decree proposals to Bogota, and looking ahead to 2026, they are demanding court compliance. It's a massive evolution, right? Going from local activism to sophisticated, multi-decade international lobbying.
But here's the thing. Taking the fight global requires immense, almost unbelievable patience. 10 years. The report explicitly revealed that 10 years is the absolute minimum time it takes for a case to move through the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The RDC broadcast deliberately used this number to plead for patience from their own community. They wanted to make it crystal clear that international justice isn't some overnight fix. It is a long, grueling process that demands sustained institutional capacity just to see it through to the end.
And that brings us to our conclusion, the long road to self-determination.
The core message of the RDC's Accountability Report is a pretty grounding reality check. Securing binding legal rights against national resistance is a slow, multi-generational marathon. It requires serious legal savvy and unyielding persistence. Which leaves us with a profound question to think about. When domestic laws stall for decades and direct court orders are completely ignored, how long must a marginalized community wait for autonomy? Well, the RDC has made it clear. They are done waiting. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we continue to decode the world's most complex stories.